Mom, did you read Dad's letter? My son asked on Mother's Day. I froze. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard him. The clinking silverware around the table faded into the background. Even the soft laughter of my grandchildren somewhere in the living room seemed distant. Dad's. What letter? I asked. My son blinked at me. His smile faltered. The letter Dad left for you, he said slowly, as if he were suddenly realizing something wasn't right. The one he said explained everything. I stared at him. I didn't know what shocked me more, the word letter, or the look on his face. Because Daniel wasn't looking at me like a man sharing a memory. He was looking at me like a man who had just discovered a crack in the floor beneath him. My daughter-in-law Emily slowly set down her coffee mug. Just slowly enough for me to notice. I notice things these days. When you reach 68 and live long enough to lose the love of your life, you begin noticing little things. Tiny movements. Small pauses. Silences that don't belong. And Emily had just gone very quiet. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story, and tell me what city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far my story reaches. Mother's Day had started beautifully. At least I thought it had. The spring air was warm that morning, around 70 degrees, with sunlight spilling across my kitchen floor while I stood making blueberry muffins before getting ready. I knew I didn't need to bring anything. Emily had insisted on hosting brunch herself. Mom, you're not lifting a finger this year, she'd said over the phone 2 weeks earlier. You spent your whole life taking care of everybody else. I remember smiling after hanging up, because those words had felt nice, simple, kind. After Harold passed away 2 years ago, moments like that mattered more than they used to. Kindness felt different when loneliness became part of your daily routine. I wore a pale lavender blouse that morning. Harold always liked lavender. Makes your eyes brighter, he used to say. I remember standing in front of my bedroom mirror before leaving the house and touching the pearl necklace around my neck. It had been our 30th anniversary gift. 30 years. Funny how objects survive people. The necklace remained. His coffee mug remained. His old reading chair remained. But Harold didn't. I drove 20 minutes to Daniel's house with flowers sitting on the passenger seat beside me. Yellow tulips. Emily loved tulips. I remember feeling strangely happy that morning. Not excited. Not exactly. Just peaceful. Because Mother's Day had become difficult after Harold died. The first year without him had felt unbearable. Every commercial on television showed smiling families. Every restaurant had couples holding hands. Every grocery store had Mother's Day cards and flowers. Meanwhile, I spent most of that day sitting alone on my porch drinking cold coffee. Daniel had called, of course. Emily had called too. But calls weren't the same as people. Nothing is. So when Emily offered to host this year, I was grateful. The house looked beautiful when I arrived. White flowers decorated the dining table. Music played softly from hidden speakers. I could smell cinnamon rolls and bacon from the kitchen. My 2 grandchildren nearly knocked me over running toward me. Grandma! Grandma's here. I laughed as little Ava wrapped herself around my legs. For a while, everything felt normal. For a while, I forgot grief. I forgot the quiet house waiting for me later. I forgot eating dinner alone. I forgot sleeping on one side of the bed because I still couldn't bring myself to sleep in the middle. For a while, I was simply mom again. Daniel hugged me. Emily kissed my cheek. We sat together around the dining table while sunlight streamed through the windows. And I remember thinking, Harold would have loved this. Then Daniel asked the question, just casually, just while reaching for orange juice. Mom, did you read Dad's letter? Everything stopped. I looked at him. He looked at me. Emily looked down at her plate. I felt something cold move through my chest. Not pain. Not fear. Something stranger. Like standing in your own home and realizing a picture on the wall has been hanging crooked for years, and somehow you only noticed today. What letter? I asked again. Daniel stared. The one Dad wrote before. He stopped. Before he died. He didn't finish the sentence. Neither of us liked saying those words. Silence spread across the room. Emily reached for her coffee. Missed the handle slightly. Tiny things. Tiny things always matter. Daniel frowned. Mom, Dad told me he left it with the rest of the paperwork. Paperwork. Felt my stomach tighten. Paperwork. After Harold's funeral, there had been so much paperwork. Insurance forms, bank documents, bills, property papers. Emily had helped organize most of it. At the time, I appreciated it. I had barely been functioning. I was still waking up in the middle of the night, reaching toward Harold's side of the bed. Still expecting to hear his footsteps downstairs. Still expecting him to walk through the front door. Emily had stepped in. She sorted folders, made phone calls, labeled boxes, handled things I couldn't bring myself to touch. I trusted her. Of course I trusted her. She was family, wasn't she? I looked toward Emily. She finally looked up, smiled, but something felt wrong. Something small, something almost invisible. Her smile reached her mouth, but not her eyes. And suddenly, for the first time all morning, I had a feeling that somewhere between Harold's death and this Mother's Day brunch, something had been hidden from me, and I needed to know what it was. Top of form, I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of Mother's Day. Not because of the strange silence at brunch. Because of one question. Mom, did you read Dad's letter? I must have replayed those words 100 times after I got home. My house greeted me with the same quiet it always did. The same silence that had lived there since Harold passed away 2 years earlier. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and stood in the entryway longer than usual. Sometimes I still expected to hear him. You're home already? Did you remember coffee? Come sit with me for a minute. Strange how grief works. You can know someone is gone. You can attend the funeral, sign paperwork, cry until there are no tears left. And still, some small part of you keeps waiting. I placed my purse on the kitchen counter and set the leftover tulips in water. One of them had bent slightly during the drive home. I adjusted it carefully. Harold used to tease me about flowers. You treat flowers better than most people. I smiled a little at the memory. Then the smile disappeared. Because suddenly I remembered Emily organizing Harold's paperwork. I opened my refrigerator and stared inside without really seeing anything. Orange juice, leftover chicken soup, half a pie from Easter. I wasn't hungry. I closed the door. For the past 2 years, my life had become very small. Not sad exactly, just smaller. I lived on my retirement income and Social Security checks. I wasn't struggling, but I certainly wasn't comfortable either. I watched every dollar, cut coupons, bought generic cereal instead of brand names, turned off lights when I left rooms. Last winter I lowered my thermostat to 66 degrees and kept blankets on the couch because heating costs had gone up again. I never complained. Not to Daniel. Not to anyone. Because that's what mothers do. We learn to become smaller so our children can become bigger. Daniel had built a wonderful life for himself. A beautiful house. A successful business. Healthy children. I was proud of him. Very proud. Even if I saw him less after he got married. Even if our phone calls became shorter. Even if holidays slowly started changing. I told myself that was normal. People grow up. They build families of their own. That's life, right? I made tea and carried it into the living room. Harold's chair still sat beside the window. I hadn't moved it. I couldn't. The leather had softened over the years where his shoulders rested. His reading glasses still sat on the side table. Not because I forgot to move them, because moving them felt too final. I sat on the couch and stared at the chair. Then I looked toward the hallway, toward our bedroom, toward the closet where I had placed several boxes after Harold died. Boxes filled with things I wasn't ready to sort through. Pictures, documents, letters, cards, pieces of a life. I suddenly felt cold. Daniel said. Dad told me he explained everything in the letter. Explained what? What exactly had Harold wanted me to know? And why had I never heard about it? I tried convincing myself there was a simple explanation. Maybe Daniel remembered wrong. Maybe Harold had talked about writing a letter but never actually did it. Maybe I misplaced it. Maybe grief had made me forget. But even while I thought those things, I didn't believe them. Because Harold knew me. After 40 years of marriage, he knew me better than anyone. He knew I saved birthday cards from 20 years ago. He knew I kept receipts folded inside old books. He knew I had every letter he wrote me while traveling for work during the early years of our marriage. Harold used to laugh about it. If civilization collapses, he'd joke, you'll rebuild history from your closets. I remembered standing in our garage after his funeral, Emily beside me, stacks of folders between us. She had worn jeans and a gray sweater. Her hair pulled back. She had looked so helpful, so caring. Don't worry, Mom, she told me. I'll organize everything. At the time, I nearly cried from gratitude, because I couldn't think clearly back then. Grief had turned my brain into fog. Simple decisions exhausted me. Some mornings I forgot whether I had taken my blood pressure medicine. I forgot appointments, forgot meals, forgot days. Emily stepped in and handled things. Daniel kept saying how lucky I was. Emily's amazing with paperwork. Emily loves organizing. Emily's helping so much. And she hadn't she? I stared into my tea. It had gone cold. Outside my living room window, evening sunlight stretched across the lawn. Neighbors walked dogs. Kids rode bicycles. Life kept moving. Life always keeps moving, even when yours feels stuck. I stood slowly and walked toward the hallway closet. I don't know why. Not exactly. Maybe curiosity. Maybe instinct. Maybe something deeper. I opened the closet door and looked at the boxes stacked inside. 3 large plastic containers. 2 cardboard boxes. A smaller box labeled Harold. My chest tightened. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I pulled it toward me. Because for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't looking for memories anymore. I was looking for answers. I sat on the carpet in the hallway outside the closet with Harold's box beside me. The cardboard looked older than I remembered. Dust had settled along the edges. One corner was slightly bent where I probably pushed it around while cleaning. Funny how something can sit 10 feet away from you for 2 years and suddenly feel like it belongs to a stranger. I stared at the lid for a moment before opening it. Inside were pieces of Harold. Not the important pieces. Not his laugh. Not his voice. Not the way he used to rub circles against my hand while driving. Just the things people leave behind. An old wristwatch. 3 baseball caps. Receipts folded neatly together. Birthday cards from the grandchildren. A small notebook filled with grocery lists and reminders written in his uneven handwriting. Picked up the notebook and smiled despite myself. Milk. Light bulbs. Call dentist. By Linda Flowers. I laughed quietly. Even after 40 years of marriage, he still wrote reminders to buy me flowers. My chest tightened. I placed it back carefully. Then I kept looking. Photo envelopes. Insurance papers. Bank statements. Folders labeled in Emily's handwriting. Everything organized. Everything neat. Too neat. I frowned. Emily always had beautiful handwriting. Perfect little letters. Straight labels. Clean lines. I noticed it at family holidays when she'd write place cards for Thanksgiving dinner. Or birthday tags for presents. She used tiny hearts over lowercase i's. Harold used to tease her. You're wasting talent in accounting. You should have become an artist. I reached for one folder. Then another. Then another. Nothing. No letters. No envelopes addressed to me. No notes from Harold. I sat back. Maybe I was being ridiculous. Maybe Daniel remembered wrong. Maybe grief and suspicion were making me imagine problems where none existed. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. But then something floated back into my mind. Not a memory exactly. More like a feeling. A strange little moment I hadn't thought about in almost 2 years. 3 weeks after Harold's funeral, Daniel and Emily had come over for dinner. I made chicken pot pie because Daniel loved it growing up. We sat around this very dining room table. I remember asking a simple question. Did the attorney ever call back? Emily had answered before Daniel could. Everything important has been handled already. At the time I thought nothing of it. Nothing at all. Because grief makes you trust people. You become tired. You become dependent. People ask where you want forms sent. Where papers should go. What decisions should be made. Eventually you stop asking questions. You simply nod. I opened my eyes. Another memory surfaced. Then another. Then another. Like puzzle pieces sliding across a table. Christmas Eve. 8 months ago. Emily standing in my kitchen. Mom, I found some old mail mixed in with Harold's documents. I looked up from wrapping presents. Anything important? Asterisk no, she said quickly. Just junk. Junk. I remembered that now. The word had felt odd even then. Harold never kept junk. He saved everything. Tax records from 10 years ago. Instruction manuals for appliances we no longer owned. Every birthday card I'd ever given him. Harold treated paper like family history. Slowly looked back down into the box. Then I noticed something. Near the bottom sat a large manila envelope, folded beneath several folders. Almost hidden. I pulled it out. Empty. My heart sank. But there was writing on the front. In Emily's handwriting. Harold, personal letters. I stared. Then I turned it over. Nothing inside. Not a single page. Nothing. I felt the little hairs rise on my arms. Slowly, very slowly, I looked back into the box. Suddenly everything felt different. The room. The silence. Even the air. Because now I wasn't imagining things anymore. There had been letters. Plural. Letters. And now they were gone. I sat completely still. I don't know how long. 5 minutes maybe. 10. My eyes remained fixed on the empty envelope sitting in my lap. Then I remembered Mother's Day brunch. Emily setting down her coffee mug, missing the handle, looking down at her plate, smiling without her eyes. Tiny things. Tiny things always matter. I stood up and walked slowly into the kitchen. The house suddenly felt too quiet. I opened the refrigerator without thinking. Closed it. Opened a cabinet. Closed it. I wasn't looking for food. I was thinking. Thinking hard. Because for 2 years I had blamed grief for everything. Forgotten details. Strange feelings. Questions I never asked. But grief wasn't the only thing living in this house. Trust had lived here too. And trust can make you blind. I looked out the kitchen window. Across the street, my neighbor Margaret was watering flowers. Everything looked normal, peaceful, ordinary. But inside me something had shifted. Because I kept hearing Daniel's voice. Dad said he explained everything. Everything. Not something. Everything. I looked back toward the hallway. Toward Harold's empty envelope. And for the first time since Harold died, I had a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. What if somebody had made sure I never read those letters? Top of form the next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Not because I wanted to. Because when you reach a certain age, worry becomes its own alarm clock. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while pale blue morning light slowly spread across the room. Harold's side of the bed remained untouched. 2 years later, I still hadn't gotten used to the empty space. People tell you time heals things. I don't think that's true. I think time teaches you how to carry things. That's different. I sat up slowly and slipped my feet into my slippers. My joints felt stiff. Outside, birds had already started singing. Somewhere down the street, a lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically against the pavement. Normal sounds. Ordinary sounds. But nothing felt ordinary anymore. Because an empty envelope was sitting downstairs on my kitchen table. And somehow it felt heavier than anything I'd lifted in years. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window waiting for it to brew. Harold used to make coffee every morning. Even after he retired. Especially after he retired. He'd wake before me, shuffle downstairs wearing those ridiculous plaid pajama pants, and start the coffee maker before doing anything else. I used to tease him. You love coffee more than me. And he'd always smile. Impossible. I closed my eyes. For a moment I could almost hear him. Almost. Then the coffee machine beeped, and reality returned. I carried my mug to the table and looked at the envelope again. Harold, personal letters. Plural. Not one. More than one. I turned the envelope over in my hands. Empty. Completely empty. Then another memory surfaced. Not dramatic. Not important at the time. Just small. Harold had always written letters. Not constantly. Not every week. But for important things. Birthdays. Anniversaries. Major milestones. He liked writing things down. He used to say words look different on paper. People forget conversations, he'd tell me. But they keep letters forever. I smiled sadly. Because he was right. I still had letters he wrote me while traveling for work nearly 30 years earlier. Little notes. Simple things. Miss you. Hotel coffee tastes terrible. Can't wait to come home. I kept all of them tied together with a ribbon inside my dresser drawer. So why would I never receive his final letter? That didn't make sense. Harold would never write something important and simply forget to tell me. Never. I sipped my coffee. Cold realization slowly settled over me. After Harold died, there had been many moments that felt strange.
Moments ignorat. Moments explainat away. Moments involving Emily.
I remembered one afternoon about 6 months after the funeral. Daniel and Emily had come over to help me clean out Harold's garage. Most of the afternoon had gone smoothly. Boxes, old tools, Christmas decorations. Then I'd walked in and found Emily holding a stack of papers. She startled when she saw me. Actually startled. I remember laughing. Did I scare you? She smiled quickly. Too quickly. No, I was just sorting things. Then she slid several papers into a folder and closed it. At the time I thought nothing of it. Why would I? She was helping. Helping. That word suddenly felt strange. Because helping and controlling can sometimes look very similar. Especially when you're grieving. Especially when you're vulnerable. I stared into my coffee. Then another memory arrived. Last Thanksgiving. Daniel had been setting the table while Emily helped me in the kitchen. I remember mentioning Harold's old safe. The small one in our bedroom closet. I still haven't opened it, I'd said. Emily froze. Only for a second. Just 1 second. Then she smiled. Probably old receipts and paperwork. I frowned now. Because Harold loved that safe. Loved it. He kept important things there. Property records. Insurance policies. Letters. Family documents. I suddenly put down my coffee. Slowly. Very slowly. Then I looked toward the hallway. Toward my bedroom. Toward our closet. My heartbeat quickened. Because for 2 years, I hadn't opened Harold's safe either. Not once. Grief had made me avoid it. I told myself I wasn't ready. Maybe I hadn't been. But now something else was pulling at me. Something stronger than grief. I stood up. Walked down the hallway. Opened the bedroom door. Morning light spilled across the bed. Across Harold's empty chair near the window. Across the closet door. I stared at it. Then I walked inside. And suddenly, I couldn't remember whether Emily had ever been alone in this room after Harold died. But for some reason that thought scared me. I stood there for several seconds staring into the closet. Maybe longer. The morning sunlight reached across the bedroom carpet, stopping just short of Harold's side of the room. Dust floated through the air in thin golden lines. Everything looked exactly the same. His navy jacket still hung neatly beside mine. His winter coat remained in the corner. Even his old fishing hat sat on the top shelf where he'd tossed it after our last trip to Lake Harmony 3 summers earlier. I used to think keeping these things untouched brought me comfort. Now I wasn't so sure. Now they felt like evidence. I slowly stepped inside. The safe sat on the floor beneath Harold's hanging shirts. Small. Gray. Heavy. Nothing fancy. Just a simple steel lockbox with a digital keypad. Harold bought it years ago after someone in our neighborhood had a break-in. If we lose money, we lose money, he'd said. But family papers matter. Birth certificates. Insurance policies. Letters. Family documents. Things that couldn't be replaced. I knelt carefully on the carpet. My knees complained immediately. Getting older means your body reminds you of every movement. Harold used to joke that getting up from the floor after 60 should count as exercise. I smiled a little at the memory. Then I looked down at the keypad. And my smile disappeared. Because I suddenly realized something. I knew the code. Of course I knew the code. It had always been our anniversary. June 14th, simple. I stared at the numbers without moving. For 2 years I had avoided this moment. 2 years. Maybe because opening the safe felt too final. Maybe because grief had convinced me that some doors should stay closed. Or maybe some part of me had been afraid of finding nothing. I slowly entered the numbers. For a second nothing happened. Then click. The sound felt strangely loud in the quiet room. My heart immediately started beating harder. I swallowed. Then slowly opened the safe. Inside sat several folders. Insurance papers. Property records. Our marriage certificate. A small jewelry box. Harold's military documents. Everything looked organized. Neat. Careful. Very Harold. I let out a quiet breath. Maybe I had been imagining things after all. Maybe the letters were somewhere else. Maybe Emily really had been helping. Maybe then I stopped. Because sitting beneath a stack of folders was something I recognized immediately. A white envelope. My fingers froze. I stared. On the front, written in Harold's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words. For Linda, personal. My heart dropped. I knew Harold's handwriting better than my own. 40 years of birthday cards. 40 years of grocery lists. 40 years of little notes left on the refrigerator. There was no mistake. This was his. Slowly I picked it up. My hands had started shaking. Not violently. Just enough for me to notice. I turned it over. Still sealed. Still closed. I sat back against the closet wall and simply stared at it. Because suddenly nothing made sense. Nothing. Daniel said Harold had written me a letter. The envelope downstairs said there had been multiple letters. And now here was one hidden inside the safe. Still sealed. Still waiting. Waiting for 2 years. 2 years. I felt something tighten painfully inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something sadder. Because suddenly I wasn't thinking about Emily. I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I wasn't thinking about missing paperwork. I was thinking about Harold. About him sitting somewhere alone before he died. Writing this. Carefully choosing words. Believing I would read them. Believing they would reach me. And somehow, they never did. I ran my fingers gently across the envelope. Then I noticed something else. Beneath it sat another folded sheet of paper. I slowly pulled it out. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed. A shipping confirmation. I frowned. Then I read the date. My breathing stopped. Because the date wasn't from before Harold died. It was 3 days after his funeral. 3 days after. And beneath the shipping information sat a recipient name. Emily Parker. I stared at it. Once. Twice. 3 times. No, that couldn't be right. I looked again. Harold's documents. Harold's safe. Harold's letter. Emily's name. A cold feeling moved slowly through me. Because for the first time, this no longer felt like confusion. This felt like someone had touched things that were never meant for them. And suddenly I wasn't opening old memories anymore. I was opening a door someone had worked very hard to keep closed. I sat on the closet floor holding the shipping document in one hand and Harold's unopened letter in the other. I don't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for sunlight to shift across the carpet. Long enough for my coffee downstairs to go cold. Long enough for my thoughts to stop making sense. Because I kept staring at Emily's name. Emily Parker, my daughter-in-law. My son's wife. The woman who had held me while I cried at Harold's funeral. The woman who had brought casseroles to my house and told me not to worry about paperwork. The woman who said, "Mom, let me take care of things." I suddenly felt tired. Not physically. Soul tired. The kind of tired that settles somewhere behind your ribs. I carefully placed the documents beside me and closed my eyes. No, there had to be another explanation. There always was. Maybe the package had nothing to do with Harold's letters. Maybe she had ordered supplies. Folders. Labels. Office materials. Emily loved organizing things. Maybe. Then another thought interrupted me. A simple thought. Terrible thought. Why had she never mentioned the safe? I opened my eyes slowly. Because Emily had been in this closet. I knew she had. After Harold passed, she helped sort clothes and documents. I remembered that now. Small moments returning one at a time. Like puzzle pieces emerging from fog. Mom, I'll donate some of Harold's jackets. Mom, I'll organize these drawers. Mom, don't worry about all this. I had said yes to everything. Everything. Because grief makes decisions feel impossible. You become grateful when someone volunteers to carry part of your pain. And Emily had carried so much. Too much. I looked at the sealed envelope again. Part of me wanted to open it immediately. Part of me didn't. Because once I opened Harold's words, I couldn't unread them. Whatever was inside had waited 2 years. A few more minutes wouldn't matter. I carefully placed the letter back on my lap. Then I picked up the shipping confirmation again. There was more information below Emily's name. Tracking numbers. Package details. Small print. I adjusted my reading glasses. Then my eyes stopped. My stomach dropped. Because beneath the shipping information sat a sender address. Not a store. Not a company. Not an office. My house. My address. Harold's address. I stared. Then looked again. No. No. I could feel my heartbeat inside my neck now. Because suddenly a thought arrived so fast it nearly took my breath away. What if something had been shipped from this house? I read the line again. Sender. Harold and Linda Morrison. Recipient. Emily Parker. I blinked several times. Nothing changed. The words remained there. I felt cold all over. Because Harold had already passed away. 3 days after the funeral he wasn't here. He couldn't send anything. Which meant somebody else had. Somebody standing inside this house. Somebody with access to his things. Somebody with access to me. I slowly stood up from the closet floor. My knees felt weak. Not from age. From shock. I carried everything downstairs and spread it across the kitchen table. The unopened letter. The shipping document. The empty envelope labeled personal letters. I stared at all of it. Then another memory hit me. Hard. 3 days after Harold's funeral, Emily had stopped by unexpectedly. Daniel was at work. I remember because she brought coffee. Caramel latte for me. Black coffee for herself. We sat in this kitchen. Right here. I had barely slept during those days. Faces blurred together. Voices blurred together. Everything felt underwater. Then I remembered saying something. I don't know what to do with all Harold's things. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. Don't worry, she'd said softly. I'll take care of everything. Everything. The same word Daniel used at Mother's Day brunch. Dad explained everything. Everything. I stared at the papers again. And suddenly something inside me shifted. For the past 2 days I had been asking whether Emily knew something. Now I was asking something different. What exactly had she taken care of? Because I had a feeling. I was only seeing the beginning of it. I spent the rest of the afternoon sitting at my kitchen table. Not moving much. Not doing much. Just thinking. The unopened letter remained in front of me. So did the shipping document. Sunlight moved slowly across the floor while the hours passed, but I barely noticed. Because every few minutes another memory would return. Another small thing. Another tiny moment I had ignored. And tiny things were beginning to scare me. I remembered Emily cleaning my kitchen cabinets 6 months after Harold passed. I hadn't asked her to. I came downstairs one morning and found every drawer open. Stacks of papers spread across the counter. Receipts. Manuals. Old greeting cards. I laughed at the time. Emily, what on earth are you doing? She smiled. Helping. Helping. Always helping. Then I remembered something else. I had asked where Harold's old address book had gone. The little brown leather one he kept beside the phone. Every number he cared about was inside that book. Friends. Former coworkers. Family. People he never wanted to lose touch with. Emily looked up from sorting papers. I think I tossed it accidentally with old junk mail. Accidentally. At the time I shrugged. People make mistakes. Right? But Harold's address book wasn't junk. Nothing Harold kept was random. Nothing. I suddenly stood up and walked toward the living room bookshelf. A strange feeling had started building inside me. Slowly. Heavily. Because I realized something uncomfortable. I couldn't remember the last time I had actually gone through my own documents. Not really. After Harold died I had. Simply trusted Emily. Trusted her labels. Trusted her folders. Trusted her system. I crouched beside the lower cabinet and pulled out a plastic storage bin. Bills. Tax papers. Medical records. Everything neatly organized. Emily's handwriting stared back at me again. Bank insurance, home important. I frowned. Because suddenly I noticed something odd. Very odd. One folder tab looked newer than the others. Brighter white. Different handwriting pressure. I pulled it out. The label read. Closed accounts. I didn't remember having closed accounts. Not recently. I carried the folder back to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were only 3 sheets of paper. 3. That was it. A bank statement. A printed notice. and a withdrawal form. I stared, then looked again. My eyes moved down slowly. Joint account ending in 4821. Closed 18 months ago. Balance transferred. Transferred? I blinked. Harold and I had only shared one major savings account. Our emergency account. The account we promised never to touch unless absolutely necessary. We'd built it over decades. Small amounts at first. Then more as life improved. Money for emergencies. Medical bills. Unexpected problems. Peace of mind. I felt my mouth go dry, because I didn't remember closing it. I looked farther down. Authorized signature. Linda Morris, and I stared at my own name, then at the signature underneath. My stomach tightened. No. No. I pulled the page closer. The signature looked like mine. Almost. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. I've signed my name for nearly 70 years. You know your own handwriting. You know where your hand naturally curves. Where you pause. Where you press harder. And this looked like someone trying to be me. I said frozen. My heartbeat slowly becoming louder. Then I remembered something. One afternoon shortly after Harold died, Emily had stopped by while I was paying bills. I had complained about my arthritis acting up. My fingers had been aching badly that day. I'll fill things out for you, she'd said. You can just sign. I closed my eyes. Oh God. I remembered. Stacks of papers. Sticky notes. Little tabs marking where to sign. I hadn't read everything. I trusted her. Because why wouldn't I? She was family. My hand started trembling. Not hard. Just enough to make the paper shake. Then I slowly looked toward Harold's unopened letter. Because suddenly I wasn't asking whether something had been hidden. Wasn't asking whether Emily had crossed a line. I was asking something much worse. How much of my life had already been moved? While I wasn't looking, I didn't call Daniel. I wanted to. More than once I picked up my phone, stared at his name, then put it back down. Because what exactly was I supposed to say? Hi honey, I think your wife may have hidden your father's letters and possibly moved money while I was drowning in grief. No, not yet. I needed facts, not feelings. Harold always said emotions were like storms. Never make permanent decisions in temporary weather. I could almost hear his voice saying it. So I stayed quiet. For now. I spent the next morning at my kitchen table with coffee, and every document I could find spread out around me. Sunlight poured through the windows. Birds chirped outside. A delivery truck rolled slowly down the street. Ordinary life continued. Meanwhile, my entire world felt like it had quietly shifted beneath me. I picked up the withdrawal form again. Studied the signature. Then studied it again. Something bothered me. Not just the handwriting. The date. I looked closer. 18 months ago. My forehead tightened. 18 months. That would have been around 6 months after Harold passed. I stood up suddenly. Because I remembered something. 6 months after Harold died, Emily had insisted on taking me to the bank. At the time I barely questioned it. I had needed help setting up some automatic payments. At least that's what I thought. I could suddenly see the day clearly. Cold weather. Gray skies. I wore my blue winter coat. Emily drove because I said I felt tired. I remembered sitting beside her in the car while holiday music played softly through the speakers. She had smiled at me. We'll make this quick, Mom. Quick. I closed my eyes. Pieces started moving. Slowly. Quietly. Inside my head. We'd gone inside. Sat at a desk. A young banker greeted us. Emily did most of the talking. I remember feeling embarrassed. Embarrassed because grief had left me exhausted and distracted. The young woman asked questions. Emily answered some of them before I could. She's had a difficult year. She's still adjusting. We're helping her organize everything. Helping. Again that word. I remembered signing papers. Several papers. Maybe more. I couldn't remember exactly. At the time I didn't think much about it. I trusted Emily. I trusted family. Then suddenly another detail appeared. Tiny. Small. The kind of thing I would have forgotten forever if not for everything happening now. When we walked back toward the car, Emily had seemed unusually happy. Not relieved. Happy. I remembered laughing. Good news. And she'd looked startled. Actually startled. then smiled. Just happy we got things sorted out. Sorted out. I slowly sat back down. My heart felt heavy now, because I wasn't remembering isolated moments anymore. I was remembering patterns. Patterns hide when you're living inside them. You only see them after stepping away. I looked around my kitchen. The walls. The refrigerator covered with grandchildren's drawings. Harold's favorite coffee mug still hanging beneath the cabinet. How many times had I sat in this room believing I was surrounded by care? How many times had I thanked Emily? How many times had I looked at her and thought, she's taking care of me? I suddenly stood and walked toward the hallway closet again. Not because I knew what I was looking for, because instinct was pulling me now. Strongly. I knelt beside another storage box and began opening folders. Medical records. Insurance documents. Tax papers. Receipts. Then my hand froze. Near the bottom sat a thin manila folder. No label. Nothing written outside. Strange. Emily labeled everything. Everything. I slowly opened it. Inside sat only 2 papers. The first was another bank record. But I barely noticed it, because the second paper stole the air from my lungs. I stared at it. Once. Twice. 3 times. No. My hand started shaking, because across the top of the page were words I recognized immediately. Power of attorney authorization, and beneath it my name. And Harold's. And a signature date from nearly 2 years ago. A date after Harold had already passed. Then I looked farther down. My breathing stopped completely, because under designated representative was Emily's name, and I had absolutely no memory of signing it. Top of form, I stared at the document for what felt like forever. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too still. Outside, I could hear a lawnmower somewhere down the street. A dog barked once. A car door slammed. Normal sounds. Meanwhile, my entire world had just stopped moving. I looked down again. Power of attorney authorization. Emily's name remained there. Unchanged. Cold.
Permanent.
I sat slowly in my kitchen chair because my knees suddenly felt weak. No, this wasn't possible. There had to be some explanation. I would have remembered signing something like this. Wouldn't I? I pulled the paper closer. Read every line. Then read it again. The date sat there like a bruise. Almost 2 years earlier. 3 months after Harold died. I tried remembering that period of my life. Really remembering. But grief had turned those months into fog. Some days blended together completely. I'd wake up and sit on the side of the bed wondering what day it was. Wondering whether I'd taken my medication. Wondering why the house felt so painfully quiet. I remembered crying while folding Harold's shirts. Crying while buying groceries. Crying because I heard a song in the pharmacy. Everything hurt back then. Everything. And through all of it, Emily had been there. Helping. Always helping. My eyes moved down the page again. Then stopped. Because suddenly I noticed something strange. Very strange. The witness line. I leaned forward. Witness signature. Karen Lewis. I frowned. Karen Lewis. The name felt familiar. Then suddenly I remembered. Karen worked at the bank. Middle-aged woman. Short blonde hair. Kind smile. I had met her twice. Maybe 3 times. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't family. She was a bank employee. Why would Karen witness power of attorney paperwork? I grabbed my reading glasses and looked closer. Then my heartbeat slowed. Not from relief. From confusion. Because there was a phone number beneath the witness information. An office number. I stared at it. Then looked at my phone. Then back at the document. My fingers hovered over the screen. No. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was some perfectly reasonable explanation. Maybe Emily had become temporary representative while I was grieving. Maybe I forgot. Maybe. Then I looked at Harold's unopened letter sitting beside me. Still sealed. Still waiting. 2 years. 2 years that letter sat hidden. No more maybes. I picked up my phone. My hand felt strangely cold. I entered the number slowly. 1 digit at a time. Then pressed call. Ring. 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 My stomach tightened. Then someone answered. First State Financial, this is Karen speaking. I almost hung up. Almost. Instead I swallowed. Hello, I said quietly. My name is Linda Morrison. Silence. Then, oh, Mrs. Morrison. Her voice changed. Just slightly. But I heard it. People think older women stop noticing things. We don't. We notice everything. And suddenly Karen sounded nervous. Very nervous. I tightened my grip on the phone. I have a question about some paperwork. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, Mrs. Morrison. She paused. Paused too long. And at that exact moment, I knew she remembered me. Mrs. Morrison. Karen's voice had changed. Only slightly. Just enough. But after 68 years of living, 40 years of marriage, and 2 years of surviving grief, I had learned something important. People reveal themselves in the pauses. And Karen had just paused too long. I sat very still at my kitchen table. The phone suddenly felt heavier in my hand. Yes. I asked quietly. Silence. I could hear office sounds in the background. Typing. Phones ringing. Someone laughing somewhere far away. Then Karen cleared her throat. I remember you. Of course she did. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. Not warm. Not friendly. Careful. Very careful. I looked down at the power of attorney document lying beside Harold's unopened letter. My fingers rested lightly on the edge of the paper. I found some documents while cleaning, I said gently. I'm trying to understand a few things. Of course. Too quickly. That answer came too quickly. I noticed that too. I have paperwork showing power of attorney under Emily Parker's name. Silence. Again. Longer this time. I watched sunlight creep slowly across the kitchen floor. Then Karen spoke. Mrs. Morrison, are you saying you weren't aware of that arrangement? Arrangement. Not authorization. Not paperwork. Arrangement. My heartbeat started rising. Slowly. Steadily. I don't remember signing it, I said. Karen didn't answer immediately. I suddenly remembered Harold's words years ago during some disagreement with a contractor. People answer quickly when they're certain. Watch the ones who hesitate. Karen was hesitating. A lot. Then finally, I probably shouldn't discuss account details over the phone. My chest tightened. Because she didn't say. There must be a mistake. She didn't say. Of course you signed it. She didn't say. Everything is normal. No. She avoided the question completely. I stood up and walked slowly toward the kitchen window. Across the street, Margaret was bringing groceries inside. 2 teenagers rode bicycles down the sidewalk. Life kept moving. But suddenly I felt like I was standing still while everything else moved around me. Karen, I said softly, I just want to understand something. Another pause. Then, okay. I closed my eyes briefly. When Emily brought me into the bank, was I alone during the paperwork? Silence. I heard breathing. Papers shifting. Then Karen spoke quietly. No. My fingers tightened around the phone. No. Just one word. No. I looked down at the document again. My pulse pounded in my ears now. What do you mean? Karen let out a slow breath. Mrs. Morrison. Emily did most of the talking. Everything inside me went still. Absolutely still. Because suddenly I could see it. The office. The desk. Holiday music playing softly overhead. Emily answering questions before I could. Emily smiling. Emily saying, she's had a difficult year. Karen continued carefully. You seemed upset that day. Upset. I remembered. I remembered sitting there exhausted. Barely sleeping. Barely eating. Barely functioning. I remembered staring out the window while Emily spoke. I remembered wanting to go home. Wanting the entire appointment to end. My mouth had gone dry. What else? I whispered. Karen became quiet. Very quiet. Too quiet. Then finally she said something that sent coldness through my entire body. Mrs. Morrison. Pause. I remember asking whether you wanted more time before signing. I stopped breathing. For a moment I genuinely stopped breathing. Because suddenly I knew. Before she even said another word, I knew. Karen continued. And Emily answered before you did. The room around me disappeared. Because in that moment, for the first time since Harold died, I realized something terrifying. I hadn't been making decisions. Someone else had been making them for me. I didn't call Daniel that day. I still wasn't ready, because once I said the words out loud, everything would change. And some part of me, some foolish, hopeful part, still wanted to believe there was an explanation I hadn't seen yet. I sat in my living room long after my conversation with Karen ended. Harold's unopened letter rested on the coffee table beside me. The power of attorney papers sat underneath it. The bank records. The shipping confirmation. The empty envelope. Pieces. Just pieces. But together they were beginning to form a picture. And I wasn't sure I wanted to see the finished version. Outside, evening had started settling over the neighborhood. Golden light stretched across my front yard. The maple tree Harold planted 20 years earlier swayed gently in the breeze. I used to love sitting here in the evenings with him. He'd read newspapers. I work on crossword puzzles. Neither of us talked much. We didn't need to. Comfort becomes quiet after enough years together. I looked toward his empty chair. Then I looked back at the letter. Still sealed. Still waiting. I had avoided opening it all day. Maybe because I was afraid. Afraid Harold would confirm my worst fears. Afraid he wouldn't. Afraid of what his final words might change. But suddenly I realized something. For 2 years someone else had been deciding what I should know. What I should sign. What I should receive. What I should believe. No more. I reached for the envelope. My fingers trembled slightly. Not from age. From grief. From anger. From fear. I ran my hand slowly over Harold's handwriting. For Linda, personal, I smiled sadly. Because he always wrote my name carefully. Always. Even on grocery notes. Even on birthday cards. As if writing my name mattered. I carefully opened the envelope. Folded pages slid into my hands. 3 pages. 3. I stared at them for several seconds before finally beginning to read. Linda, if you're reading this, then I probably wasn't stubborn enough to beat whatever finally got me. I laughed softly. A broken little laugh. As that sounded exactly like Harold. Exactly. Tears blurred my eyes immediately. I kept reading. First, I need you to know something. You made my life better from the day I met you. 40 years wasn't enough. I stopped. Covered my mouth. Closed my eyes. For a moment I wasn't sitting in my living room anymore. I was 26 again. Standing beside Harold at our wedding. Dancing barefoot in our first apartment kitchen. Watching Daniel take his first steps. Building a life together one ordinary day at a time. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. Then suddenly my breathing stopped. Because the tone changed. Completely. Linda, if something ever feels wrong after I'm gone. Trust yourself. I stared. Read it again. Slowly. Trust yourself. A cold feeling moved across my skin. I continued. I know you better than anyone. You always doubt yourself before you doubt others. Especially people you love. My hands tightened around the pages. No. Harold. I kept reading. I've noticed certain things recently that have bothered me. Maybe I'm wrong. Pray I'm wrong. But if I'm not. There are documents and instructions I've left with Martin Reynolds. Martin. I sat upright immediately. Martin Reynolds. Harold's attorney. My heartbeat quickened. Because I remembered Martin. Older man. Silver hair. Kind eyes. He handled our wills years ago. But I hadn't spoken to him since Harold passed. I looked back down. Then read the next sentence. And suddenly the room around me disappeared. Because Harold wrote, Linda, if you're reading this late, then someone made sure you didn't read it sooner. The next morning I called Martin Reynolds. I sat at my kitchen table with Harold's letter beside me and my phone in my hand. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Gray clouds covered the sky. The house felt smaller somehow. Or maybe I felt smaller. Because in less than a week, everything I thought I knew had changed. I stared at Martin's number for several seconds before pressing call. Ring, ring, ring. Then, Martin Reynolds speaking. My throat tightened. Martin. It's Linda Morrison. Silence. Then his voice softened immediately. Linda. Not Mrs. Morrison. Linda. Just Linda. The way people speak when they remember funerals and grief and years of friendship. It's been a long time, he said gently. Yes. I swallowed. Too many emotions crowded into my chest all at once. Fear, confusion, anger, hope. I found a letter Harold left. Silence. A very long silence. Then, oh God. I closed my eyes, because those 2 words told me everything. He knew. He knew exactly what I was talking about. Martin. I whispered. Did Harold leave instructions? Another pause. Then I heard him exhale slowly. Linda. His voice had changed. Careful. Serious. Can you come to my office? My stomach tightened. When? As soon as possible. 40 minutes later I was sitting across from Martin in his office. Nothing had changed. Same dark bookshelves. Same frame degrees on the wall. Same little bowl of peppermint candy near the reception desk. Martin looked older. More tired. But his eyes looked exactly the same. Kind. Steady. He folded his hands together and looked at me for a long moment. I'm sorry, he finally said. For what? For this. Then he opened a drawer, reached inside, and pulled out a sealed envelope. My heart stopped, because I recognized the handwriting immediately. Harold. Another letter. Martin placed it gently on the desk. Harold gave this to me 6 weeks before he passed. I stared. Couldn't speak. He told me not to give it to you unless. Martin hesitated. Unless what? Martin looked directly into my eyes. Unless you came to me yourself. The room felt suddenly too quiet. I stared at him, then at the envelope, then back at him. Why? Martin sighed heavily. Because Harold was worried. Worried about what? Martin was quiet for several seconds. Then finally, he thought someone around you was becoming too involved in your affairs. I felt cold. Ice cold. Martin continued softly. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't make assumptions. But Harold told me something I'll never forget. I gripped the arms of my chair. My heart pounded. What did he say? Martin looked at me sadly. Then he spoke. If Linda starts doubting herself after I'm gone. Pause. Tell her she isn't losing her mind. Tears immediately filled my eyes, because suddenly I understood. Harold knew me. He knew me completely. He knew I would question myself, question my memory, question my instincts, question my own heart, just like I had for 2 years. Martin slowly slid a folder toward me. I looked down. Bank records, copies of documents, property papers, notes, evidence, lots of evidence. Then I saw one familiar name. Emily Parker. Again, 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 again. I slowly looked up at Martin. He met my eyes and quietly said, Linda, you weren't being cared for. You were being managed. I sat there staring at him while Harold's words echoed in my head. Trust yourself. And for the first time since my husband died, I did. Bottom of form, bottom of form, bottom of form.